Hi and welcome to this video, which is part 2 in this series on this MINI R56 with the diesel engine and a rattling engine at that. So what I've done in this episode is basically to drain the oil. So I've started with the oil filter, I've removed that, I dissected the oil filter. Sadly that has revealed a fair bit of aluminium filings in there. So obviously I thought I'm going to have to check the sump now. So I've removed the sump like so, and in the bottom of this there is like a small amount of oil that won't come out. There was some bits of plastic. Now at first I thought perhaps these were metal and that would be the engine pretty much finished, but thankfully they're plastic, so I'm hoping that's just off the tensioner at the top of the engine, because I do believe there's a chain between the two cams. So hopefully that's what that's off. So anyway, so the sump came off. I've also found, disappointingly, I've got a hole in my sump. And then looking at the underneath of the engine, the pickup strainer seems to be perfectly clear. So I don't think I need to remove that. And the bottom of the engine actually looks quite clean. So it doesn't look like it sort of had burnt oil in there. It looks like things have actually been fairly reasonable. So I'm presuming there must be a blockage. Perhaps it's the oil cooler or something, or the little pipe that goes to the turbo. There's a filter in that, I believe. So that would be my next step, is to look at those areas, which would be the front of the engine. But anyway, so this episode, it's all about the oil basically, and hopefully you'll enjoy watching it, and many thanks for watching it. So my first job is to remove and inspect the oil filter, as that can tell a lot about how a car has been treated. But first, a few photos showing the main parts under the bonnet of this Mini. So at the front of this Mini we do actually have a catalytic converter and a DPF filter just below that. And it might be worth pointing out that the oil filter location isn't the easiest to access. So there is the top of the filter, and you might find it easier if you just sort of move the coolant bottle to one side, or remove it completely like I did, to get better access. So to remove the bottle you'll need a Torx 25. It's just a single screw. Now I do believe you should be able to just push it to one side once you've removed that screw, and that should give you better access to that oil filter that's buried there under those pipes. Now I found, obviously it was still incredibly awkward, and there was no way I was going to get a camera clean shot straight down there. So what I did is actually remove the bottle like so. It's got like a spring clip at the bottom that holds that on. There it is, that's the spring clip. So you sort of just pull the pin out, or the wire part, and then it pops off. And so that was the bottom hose, and then this was the top hose, which I've just plugged with a couple of dowels. So you will need to put a little bit of cloth or something underneath the filter, because it's going to possibly leak a little bit. So for this it's a 27mm socket to remove the housing. Now as you undo it, hopefully the oil that's in that housing will start to drain back down into the sump, because there is like a little seal in there that, as it comes up with the filter, allows that oil to drain back down. So I'll show you that. There it is there. It's got a little rubber seal on as well. So as we pull the filter out, that should come out of the little drain hole. And there we are. So it's looking rather black. So I think what we'll do is dissect this as well. Right then, so time to dissect the oil filter. and see if there's any surprises hiding inside. So one thing with these filters, at least being the paper type, we haven't got to cut open a metal canister. So we should be able to just go around this quite easily. Obviously got to remove it first, and that might actually be the hardest part, especially for me. That was actually my second attempt at levering that out. First time it didn't work either. Right then, so there's what a clean filter looks like on the right. So we just snip around this, and that way we can open the pleats and see if anything nasty is hiding in there. Hopefully not. We'll speed this up. Right, so that's the one end off. You can see there's a plastic cage inside. Alright, so we just get this other end off. Oh, it's looking shiny.
No.
Yes, it's looking very shiny. It's not what I wanted to say. So there's the cage. There's a fair amount of aluminium in that.
Wow.
That's a pretty shiny oil filter. Bit disappointed there. So we know some damage has happened to the engine. So I went over it with a magnet, thinking at first that it would be, or the assumption was it's magnetic. Any metal would be magnetic. But actually it's not. This is aluminium. So it picked up a little bit of metal, or magnetic ferrous metal. But what I did in the end was just to wash this filter down, and then basically mop it up with a paper towel, like so. And as you can see, that is a very shiny paper towel. I was actually hoping to capture the metal in one go, but obviously aluminium's a little bit different. But it's enough there to see that we've definitely got some engine damage. And it's not magnetic. A little bit there on the magnet, but only a little bit. So it might be worth just showing a couple of photos of that oil drain back in the base of the oil filter. And here you can see that's obviously where the filtered oil returns back to the engine. So what I'll do is I'll just pop the plastic cover back on there. Normally I think that's tightened to 25 Newton meters, but we'll just pop it back on for the moment, because we've obviously got a lot more work to do on this engine. Right then, so time to jack the Mini up and drain that oil. And again, here's a few photos just showing underneath the car. This is obviously with the plastic tray removed, because there doesn't appear to be a plastic tray on my car. And then here's a close-up view of the oil sump that we'll be removing. And as you can see, there's the bottom of the DPF. And it is sort of going over the sump somewhat. So we'll pop our trolley jack under here. Now normally I would jack up from underneath. I'd put it on a couple of low rise ramps. But the subframe on this one doesn't really lend itself to a single trolley jack. I think you could probably do it on each side of that exhaust. But anyway, so we'll do it the conventional way for the moment. Might have to move a few things around, as I need to get access in there for cameras. So that's what we're sort of looking at the moment. So we'll drop this down. And that didn't sound good. That sounded quite crunchy. Hopefully that was only surface rust, and the axle stand didn't actually just go through the subframe. But anyway, we'll worry about that another day, I think. So using a 21mm socket. Now what I'm going to do is obviously I'm going to empty this through a sieve, just in case there's anything worth catching. Because I don't know with this engine. Obviously, all I've been told is the top end has gone, whatever that means. Looking at the aluminium in there, that's the camshafts and the top of the cylinder header, what's gone. Right, so I'm going to get this exhaust off to give me a bit more space here, so when I drop the sump I can actually get a nice clear view inside. So nothing appeared to come out into the sieve, so that's good news. So I can put that to one side and focus on removing the exhaust to give us better access to the sump bolts. So this was clearly very stuck. I was hoping that by heating it, it might have got it loose. Didn't seem to really. I think the thread was a bit too corroded. But it's a 16mm socket for that. I did try to use some air tools and gently persuade it to come off by going backwards and forwards. And then I sort of went on to one of my bigger ones, and that was a little bit too powerful in the end, and it ripped it off. Yeah, it's starting to rip now, and it's off. Okay, I'll probably be welding that bracket and trying to repair it, looking at the cost of a new one being £25. But anyway, so that's now off. It's not giving me the access I need, so I'm going to drop the exhaust off the two rubber hangers. So what I normally do is just try and poke a thin piece of metal in there and squirt a bit of oil, and then if you just swirl that around, it sort of makes the rubber seals come off, or the rubber brackets as it were, the hangers, come off quite nicely. Probably should use some sort of rubber friendly lubrication really. But anyways, that's off, and I still haven't got much more room. So I'm thinking now I'm going to remove that plate. So this is a 10mm socket, and there's 6 bolts here, quite small ones, and quite rusty again. I do wonder if this car's been driven through the sea at some point, because there is definitely a lot of surface corrosion. Okay, so I'll rest that onto an axle stand. So I'm just going to check this oil again, see if I can see anything. It looks clean. Right then. And finally, time to remove the sump and see if there are any surprises. Okay, so at least we've got good access now to the bottom of the sump. So there's 15 bolts that need removing and 2 nuts. So there's like 2 locating bolts. This is one of them. So this is a nut, and that's held on with a 10mm socket. And the remaining bolts are all held on with an 8mm socket. So this is the one that's got the plastic bracket on. So it's got 2 nuts on this one. There's a further nut just above that. Now this one here was pretty awkward. I couldn't seem to get anything in there because of the bottom of the exhaust. So thankfully what I did have was a low profile set, which I'll put a link in the description of the video for this. So what we've got here is a very short 8mm socket. So that should just get in there quite nicely. See, the difference between that and a normal socket is quite almost double. So this will just fit in there quite nicely, like so. Make sure it's on the right way around. Want to be undoing it, not tightening it up. There we go. So there it is. I will actually be taking this DPF off soon, I think, to try and get to the oil cooler. But we'll just stick with things one at a time at the moment. So right now we should better just get the sump off. Now there's not much access to the lip of this sump, so it's not the easiest of sumps to try and lever. You've got one good spot, which is here where I'm trying to put this sort of chisel in. That seems to be almost all. And there my sump then started to decide to leak, so it's obviously got a hole. It's decided to show itself. I suppose better it shows it now. So it took quite a bit of leverage at this point. But it's starting to come off. Now I was expecting to see a lot of burnt oil through oil servicing neglect or something. I was actually quite surprised that it was pretty clean in there. So here we go. That's the sump off. Yeah, so it actually looks all quite nice and clean. I'll add a few labelled photographs now, just so that we can see all the different parts in there. So there we can see the oil pickup tube with its mesh strainer, which is actually clean. And there's also the dipstick tube. And you'll also note there's another, what appears to be another tube coming down into the sump. And I think what that is an oil level sensor. So there's our sieve again, which looks perfectly clear. So there it is, there's the oil level sensor. And there's another photo showing that. Now, this wasn't actually connected on my car for some reason. Right then, so back to the oil sump. Now, I know that you can't drain all the oil out of these sumps because of the drain plug being sort of pushed in somewhat. So what we can see is there's definitely some bits in there. As soon as I saw that, I thought, uh-oh. Is that the engine completely finished now? So obviously I would like to actually get this car back on the road. So here we go. So there is about 400 millimeters of oil that's always left in the sump after changing the oil. So that was quite tarry. As you can see, it took quite a bit to get it all out. You can see it's quite thick and tarry. So I'll try and get all these little bits out. And then what I'll do is I'll spray that over and see what we've got. So I'll just check how much oil actually came out there so that we know what's normally left in there. And it's about 400 ml. Okay, so I'll spray it over with a bit of brake cleaner. And thankfully it appears to be plastic. So I'm assuming that's the tensioner off the small chain that links the inlet and exhaust cams together. So perhaps we've got a problem up there with that chain and the cams. So here's a photo showing those plastic bits, which I think are off the chain tensioner. And here's the sump once it's all been cleaned up. This I'll obviously probably weld to try and repair that hole and save myself £20. Right then, so here's some reference photographs which you can pause to view for longer. So here's the photo showing all the main compartments under the bonnet. Here you can see the fuses, etc. And so there's our difficult to access oil filter. Just poking its head out there. The two pipes on the coolant bottle. And then with the coolant bottle removed, we've got much better access. And there's the oil filter base. And that's showing where the oil goes back to the engine. And there's our oil filter, absolutely fully loaded with aluminium particles, which is not good. And then we go underneath the car, where things look a lot better. Everything's clean, and the strainer isn't blocked. So no oil starvation came from the strainer. And then there's the oil level sensor, which for some reason is not connected on my car. I don't know why that is not connected. I can't imagine Mini fitting it and not connecting it. But anyway, and then the parts in the sump, and a nice clean sump that now needs mending because of this little hole there. So another little job to do. So you've been watching removing the sump on a 2009 MINI R56 with the 1.6 diesel engine. And thank you for watching, and I hope this video helps you service and maintain your car within your budget. This video was filmed and edited by me, Mark Savage, in March 2022, and I can be found on Instagram and Facebook as Coots and Gaiters.